Recently, I told a lady that you have done as well as anybody I've ever seen to things to do to put your marriage back together. I mean, it appeared to be hopeless. It appeared that there was no way they were going to make it. And yet, because of her and the things that she did, and that she did well, eventually they put the marriage back together and are doing fine. And when she said, so, I thank you for the compliment, but I know you deal with a lot of people. How did I do differently than other people that you deal with? And that's a perfect segue into what I'd like to talk about today. Hi, I'm Dr. Joe Beam with Marriage Helper. Jim Pourteau, that I'll introduce again in a moment, was with me in a previous podcast where we talked for about an hour about 3 things not to do if you really want to save your marriage. I mean, sometimes things just don't go right? Your spouse walks in and tells you that he or she is in love with somebody else, or that they're not in love with you, or maybe they've never been in love with you. They want out of the marriage, and there are all kinds of things that people do that actually make it worse because they're trying to make the marriage better. And if you have not heard that podcast, please go look for it. 3 things not to do if you want to save your marriage. And we said in that one that we would come to this one, which is a podcast about 3 things to do if you want to save your marriage. Now, you understand that we can't give you in just 3 points everything you need to know.
Oh, I'm turning it off then.
But we can give you some really strong basic information here that'll be valuable. The fellow you just heard is Jim Pourteau. Jim is a relationship expert. As a matter of fact, he works with businesses ranging from corporations to churches and helping them do things better. And nearly everything, my guess is, that you work with them about comes down to relationships.
Well, it really does. You know, if you think about it, we don't live on a planet by ourselves or some kind of island. Some joke that said even if we were deserted on an island, we'd argue with ourselves. You know, and I've been there a couple times, I have to confess. But it really, when it comes down to life, it's all about relationships. You know, we all want to be loved. We all want to be respected. It's not just gender specific. It's not just something that some people go through. We want to be in meaningful, deep, intimate relationships. And the truth is about all relationships, Joe, and you taught me this, whether it's a business relationship or if it's with our children or a spouse or someone like that, really they all have very similar components, just at different levels of commitment and different levels of physical and mental intimacy.
Yeah, that's right. But even then, there are levels of intimacy in those relationships. And so you can already tell just from what you've heard from Jim in the last few seconds, he truly is a relationship expert with his own business working mightily with corporations and individuals. At the same time, he also helps us out at Marriage Helper. Jim leads a lot of our intensive 3-day workshops that we do for marriages in crisis. He also coaches couples through Marriage Helper that he does mostly by telephone and trains other coaches for us that we can make available to people where they can get the help that they need. So based on Jim's expertise and my tremendous confidence in him, plus the fact I just love the guy, I've invited him onto this podcast. And Jim, let's talk about 3 things that people, if they really want to save their marriage, these are kind of 3 foundational musts. What would the first one be?
That's really good. And I just want to reiterate, if I may, Joe, that, you know, there are a number of things we need to do. There's no silver bullets here, so to speak. Right. But really, these are 3 components that are going to get you in the right direction, in the right pace, at the right place, in the right time. So the first thing you want to do is a lot of times what happens in relationships, as I'm speaking to people, and I've even noticed in my own life, is instead of really identifying what the problem is, we focus on symptoms. We're fighting about money. We're fighting about the kids. We're fighting about all different kinds of things. In my house, it's who took out the trash or picked up after the dogs outside. But either way, or where to eat. But either way, we have these symptoms that we're really fighting over, and they're not the real issue. And so what happens is we find ourselves repeating the same argument, we're repeating the same frustration, and that's because we're addressing a symptom, not the problem or the issue that's really at hand. It would be like if I had and if you'll forgive me, it may be a brain tumor, and it was giving me headaches, and all I did was focus on the headache, and I'm constantly giving myself Tylenol, but I don't understand why I'm getting sicker. And oftentimes that's what happens. So when I'm working with a couples, and even when I look at my own relationship with Shannon now, we'll be married 30 years this year. Well, one of the things that I have to look at with me is what am I really fighting about here? What are we really upset about? We talked about the anger in the last podcast, and really it's about what am I hurt about here? What's the real hurt? With a lot of couples, we spend an amazing amount of time focused on what we think is the real problem. If I could give an example, may I?
Sure.
Well, in cases of where there's been an affair or infidelity, both men and women, I find them saying, well, if I could just get rid of her, or if I could just get rid of him, everything would be fine.
Yeah.
They spend this incredible amount of time studying that person. I'm going to call that person. They go on their Facebook page and Instagram and every other social media outlet out there, almost borderline stalking to figure out how they can put things in place to stop this other man or other woman for being in the person's life. Now, again, I'm not talking about an absence of boundaries. I'm not talking about an absence of confrontation when this happens.
No,
I'm talking about
more of a fantasy.
Well, yeah.
Like she is the problem.
Oh.
Now, obviously, she is a problem.
Right.
We don't deny that.
Without a doubt.
But what you're saying is that the things that people focus on often aren't the real issues, right?
Without a doubt. And what they say, too, is that whatever you focus on is what you'll see. And so when they focus on the other man or the other woman, or they focus on the porn addiction, which has been self-diagnosed, by the way, they just say, hey, my husband, looked at porn, or my wife looked at porn, and now they're a sex addict or something. When you focus on that, it takes you off the ability to actually confront and deal with the things that are needed to address at hand. Right. So some of you know my story. If you think about Shannon and I left Shannon for another woman. And I had everything externally as people looked at our relationship that you would want. We had the nice house. We had the 2 nice cars, the vacations, the Harley. Let's just pause for a moment and think about Harleys. And
another fantasy for
me. and was successful in my area of career choice and popular at that time and things like that. People used to look at our marriage and say, that's what I want. They didn't really know what was going on behind the scenes, but they had a picture of what they thought it was. Well, I left Shannon for another woman. And when in leaving her for this other woman, one of the things I can say that Shannon did, either by, if you believe in God's help, maybe her behavior or personality style, was she really, after the initial focus, didn't focus that much on the other woman. It was really on our relationship, on her. And that was really powerful. And we'll talk about more of that in a minute. And I think that allowed us to identify some problems that were in the relationship for years that we can now be aware of. And, you can be aware once you become aware. And so now we're aware of it. I ended up searching outside of my marriage because I had a perception of what our relationship was. It was my reality. I felt invisible and insignificant, that I didn't really matter. And because that's what I focused on, Shannon, in her daily good life, would sometimes forget something. And the next thing you know, I'm going, see, I must not matter because you forgot that. Or you didn't listen to me, so I must not matter. Those kind of things kind of came into it. So I created a alternate reality based on my perception that was the real problem there. It wasn't that Shannon was rude. It wasn't that this other woman was prettier or smarter or whatever. Right. No, she just became something else at that moment that fulfilled or filled that void for me. Does that make sense?
Makes a lot of sense.
And so to focus on her would only cause me, even so, say Shannon was able to snap her fingers and remove this other woman out of my life. Just there it goes. She's gone. Okay. Well, I still feel vulnerable. I still feel insignificant. I still feel invisible. And so, and we're talking about a me issue right now. It's not a total relationship issue, but the bottom line in that, I would have found something else to fill that void.
Yeah. And the way we hear that often is, okay, the affair is over, but he hasn't come home.
Yeah.
Or the affair is over, but my wife doesn't want to be here. It's because the affair was bad, no doubt about it. We're not diminishing that in any shape, fashion, or form. But the real issue was something deeper.
Oh, without a doubt. And, we know that one of the things we teach in our workshop is that, based on the studies we have, and it says that the reason people divorce, it isn't because of money. Mm-hmm. It's not because of another person.
Right.
It's not because you couldn't decide where to eat tonight. It's all based on I don't feel loved, I don't feel liked, and I don't feel respected.
Right.
Somewhere in there.
A lot of research that has been done over the years, that didn't show up just in one, but in several researches, so that they found when they were asking people, why did you really want out of this relationship? It was always at least one, if not all three of those things you just mentioned. The way we often talk about it, particularly in our podcast and things we post on Facebook and et cetera, I say it in a way that's much simpler because it helps me understand it better, and that's this. People don't leave what they have unless they believe what they're going to is better. And so think about it this way. And rather than focusing on Sally Sue, okay, my husband's involved with, and I'm making up the name Sally Sue.
If your name's Sally Sue.
I don't know you. I didn't. I'm certainly not trying to insult you.
Not even sure if there are people named Sally Sue.
Hey, I'm from the Deep South.
Oh, that's right.
I'll guarantee you there are people named Sally Sue. There's probably pigs named Sally Sue. Okay. But rather than focusing on her, it would be like this. If you really want to find the issue to work on, and by the way, this is still an investigative process. What I mean is you typically won't instantly know. Right. Sometimes you do. Mm-hmm. But it's like this. Okay, if people don't leave what they have unless they believe what they're going to is better, why would my spouse think that's better? Now, you might not find the exact answer to begin with. Now, and we'll talk more about this in a few minutes, but then the first thing I do is I examine me. Are there things I'm doing that are not fulfilling deep needs, like Shannon, without even realizing it, was leaving your deep needs for appreciation and approval?
Oh, exactly. And what's probably not unique to us is that neither one of them could clearly identify what that need was in the beginning.
Mm-hmm. And that's not unusual at all. Okay. And we need to do a podcast on that, how to figure that out, because there are actually some principles there. But if we go back to the principle I'm talking about, people don't leave what they have unless they believe what they're going to is better. So the first thing to do is examine me. Okay. Am I doing something that's causing my spouse to think being someplace other than with me is better? In other words, if I'm being controlling, if I'm have anger issues, etc. Okay, then no, I can start looking at that as a problem. Or if there's this thing in the relationship that he sees something out there in that relationship is better than in this relationship, well, what's missing here? So it's a little bit different than what that first step is. The first step is really I'm looking at me. Mm-hmm. Then the second step is I look at the relationship. Okay, what's missing in this relationship that led him or her to believe that being over there, in other words, being without me, is better? And then you can kind of look at, okay, what other needs might exist in my spouse that I've never really figured out, or maybe he or she has never even really figured out that might be being taken advantage of with what's going on here. And that kind of gives you a way to look at it and go, okay, what Sally Sue is doing is bad, but she's not really my enemy. I mean, well, I guess in a sense she is your enemy, but you know what I'm saying? In the sense that it's not just making her go away, because whatever the reason was that set that situation up doesn't cease to exist just because she falls off a cliff.
No.
And so what we're trying to say here is if you really want to do the right thing, and this is crucial, this is bedrock stuff, as Jim said, not the magic bullet, but bedrock stuff, start trying to figure out, what is the problem really? Okay, let me look at me. And we don't want you to beat yourself up about that. We'll talk more about that in a couple of minutes. Like me. Now let's look at our relationship that we have had until now. And now let's look at what it is that's attracting him or her. Mm-hmm. And it's not always another person.
No.
It can be a lifestyle, which means that in some of these situations, it's going to be even tougher. You say, what do you mean? Well, just was listening to a lady that made a call in today. We're going to do a podcast about it soon. And she said, we planned to have our first child, planned pregnancy, and during the pregnancy, he left me. Got involved with another woman, moved in with her. And she's asking, why would he do that when we planned the pregnancy? Now, obviously, I don't know the man. I can't answer that question directly. But the first thing that pops into my mind is, You don't leave what you have unless you believe what you're going to is better. Now, either she's offering him something he doesn't have, or he's running away from something. Like, I don't know if I can be a dad. I don't know if I want to grow up yet. I don't know if I don't want that kind of responsibility. Now, that stuff might not even be him thinking that through.
Right.
Just a feeling that he has of, I feel trapped. I got to get out of here. And all of a sudden, there's an opportunity over there. Now, in a situation like that, if that indeed is the case with him, and he won't be able to do it in this podcast, but there are ways to actually have conversations to discover whether that is, even if he does not yet realize that's what's going on. So that third part of, okay, what does the other person need that I'm not doing? That one might be kind of hard because comes back to responsibility, being a dad, all those kinds of things. Now, that doesn't make it impossible. But you understand that lady then, if that turns out to be the reason, looking at the other woman, as bad as that is not part of the real issue of what's going on at all.
No.
It's the guy running away. And so what you're saying, and I agree wholeheartedly, don't fight about and focus on the things that hurt or bad, but they really aren't the issue at all, because there's no way to put the relationship back together by fighting over something that's not really the issue at all.
No, and it could actually become the distraction and actually extend the repair time. You know, so you know, hey, look, I'm North American. I'm so happy I was born here in the USA, and
I'm proud to be American, buddy.
But of course, you know, that predisposes me to be an impatient individual. Mostly, I want my stuff to happen now, and you know, so here's one thing that you can do that will actually meet that core need as a human that we have, which is, I'd like to get this taken care of, and focusing on the real problem that's at hand, discovering what that is, will actually get you to the faster place of confrontation that's needed. And then be able to have confrontation with that solution-based, or confrontation that's positive solution-based. You can find a way through this and be able to become even more intimate after this fact. And so that was one thing that we went through. Many of my clients go through that. If I just wish there was some way with my clients, I could send an injection or a pill that they could take, and they could focus on what the real thing is there. You know, what do you feel you've lost? What do you feel like your expectations haven't been met? Where are you being disrespected? And so if you think back to the real problem, I talked about vulnerability and insignificance, being invisible. What was I really feeling there? Well, I was feeling disrespected. Not loved. And I can tell you that in hindsight, thinking through an understanding of that now and seeing the real problem and working on that, Shannon could be nothing further from that. She was engaged. She did put me as number one in her life, so to speak. But all of this is perspective.
Exactly.
And that becomes our reality if we're not careful.
And so if you're out there going, okay, I hear the principle, but how do I figure this out? Stick with what Jim said earlier. Based on the several research projects, typically it comes down to, I don't feel like you like me. I don't feel like you love me. I don't feel like you respect me. And so if you go through that little formula we gave you a minute ago, what do? You think, what have I done or failed to do that might have indicated, or at least led my spouse to believe, I didn't like him or her, I didn't love him or her, I didn't respect him or her. And so if you realize, well, I have been pretty controlling, then they feel disrespected. And if you think, I haven't done anything wrong, well, congratulations, because that sets you aside from the rest of the human race. But sometimes if you have friends who really will be honest with you, you can say, okay, I don't want you to beat me up. I'm not here to feel bad about myself. I'm here to learn about myself. What have you seen?
Oh, without a doubt.
Either that I've done or didn't do. And, for example, I don't know why, but a lady just flashed in my head as I said that. If she ever asked me that the first thing I would do is look at her and say, do you realize at the party the other night, you said in front of everybody, well, my husband's just not a good businessman. He's good at what he does, but if it weren't for me, we'd have nothing. And you said that in front of everybody there. I could have said to her, maybe this is one thing you need to learn about what you do that leads him potentially to feel unloved, disliked, disrespected. And then if you get the opportunity to talk to your spouse, now, if you ask those direct questions and he or she's already out the door, they may say things just to hurt you.
Yeah, very painful stuff. I did that to Shannon.
Mm-hmm. Which may not have a lot of validity. Or they may ignore you like, it's too late now. I don't care. But there are still ways to begin to figure it out as you have conversations with each other if you do a lot of listening. Mm-hmm. So it might not be able to sit down and say, tell me, because either they might, it's possible, or they might be mean to you, or they might ignore you. And so what do? You pay a lot of attention, you listen, you watch, you evaluate. And no, it's not the perfect solution, I agree. But it's still trying to find out what is the real issue. And there's no reason for me to fight with him about her.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that it's exacerbated because of the emotion that's involved at the time. Sure. You know, and I don't believe, and I know that, you know, this is, trust me, folks, the man that is speaking in front of you, been, as my wife has helped to create, and then in my education, Joe has spent so much time mentoring me. But I can tell you that it's not that you're evil. It's not that you are impure in your thoughts. It's not, you know, all that kind of stuff. It's just that we're human. Mm-hmm. And every one of us have different sides of us. Mm-hmm. Joe and I have talked about a study that was done back in 1956, the Joe Harry window. Oh, yeah. Joseph London Herringham did a study, and there were 4 areas in a human's life that they look at. Of course, one was the open area, which everybody knows. I know, you know. Mm-hmm. The other area was what we call the hidden area, and that's what I know about me, but I hide from you because I'm afraid you're going to, you know, use it against me or not accept me. And mm-hmm. man, that's the key in all of our life. None of mm-hmm. us want to be, you know, rejected or judged. Mm-hmm. The third area is called the blind side. That's the area that everybody sees about me, but I don't know about me. And yes, you do have it. The proof of you right now saying, I don't think I have that, is proof you have a blind side. Mm-hmm. And then the fourth area was called the unknown, which was, you don't know this about me and I don't know this about me, mm-hmm. but it's still something that affects me. Mm-hmm. That was the thing I was telling you about with feeling invisible and insignificant. Mm-hmm. I didn't really know what it was. I just knew there was an emotional reaction that occurred when that was experienced. And really the only way that you and I can come to an understanding of that is to be able to listen, like Joe just said, mm-hmm. Listen without defensiveness mm-hmm. to someone we trust. Now, I realize that if you're in a relationship that's strained right now, you may not trust your spouse. Mm-hmm. So it'd be hard to listen and discover. Shannon claims, I'll put that in air quotes, that I have a tone. She'll probably say I just used it. I don't know. But I can accept that because I trust her now. Mm-hmm. And I've had one or two other trusted people say that about me. Mm-hmm. If I don't, I'm going to reject it. Mm-hmm. If it's something that is unknown, if it's blind, unknown, or even hidden, I need somebody around me that I can trust to share. You say, what do you mean? Well, if and that's a great question. If you don't know what's happening in you, or you can't see it, then what a good counselor or coach can step in and say, you know, let me talk to you for a minute, Jim. What I'm hearing going on here or seeing here, have you noticed this kind of thing? Mm-hmm. And because there's not a lot of baggage or predisposition to mistrust or things like that, typically it can be heard better. And of course, you know, the way you serve something can be all the difference in the world. Yeah. Delivery matters. And then when it comes to the hidden part, there's something about you that you're scared to share, or there's fear mm-hmm. in there. A trusted guide, someone that's there, can actually, you can take that brick down, come down, and you won't be slammed with the brick, which may be something that's opposite in the relationship you have. So when you're doing this, I think it's very important that you're willing to really face those issues, and to ignore them, to deny them is not going to take care of it. And you can focus and be passionate mm-hmm. about the symptom, mm-hmm. and 10 years from now be struggling with the same problem. Oh, and leave this relationship, go into another relationship, and it's like Groundhog Day.
What was the Sonny and Cher song that played every morning? I got you,
got you, babe.
Okay.
Yeah.
But to use the Joe Harry window, mm-hmm. I hadn't thought about using that in this context in a long time, so thank you for reminding me. Isn't it amazing how much you forget about what you know.
I can't remember it.
About that hidden part. You mentioned porn earlier, and we see that, you know, like particularly, it's usually almost always, not always, but almost always, the wife is like, okay, he's committed adultery because he's been looking at pornography.
Yeah.
All right. And by the way, we're not passing a judgment one way or the other. We're talking about what she feels. I was just looking at some research again just a few minutes ago, as a matter of fact, a doctoral dissertation that I thought was done extremely well. And without going into all the details of it, basically, he was proposing a model that if a man is looking at pornography, and he was dealing with men, that's why it's not a sexist thing here, like male or female, but if a man was looking at pornography, that, and he was actually studying ministers of a particular denomination, in that particular denomination, all the ministers were male, and for the ones that were regularly using porn, he was trying to understand their motivations for it. Mm-hmm. And so as he concluded his study, and this is a dissertation, you know, hundreds of 200 or 300 pages, he concluded that some are doing it because they have sexual compulsivity, what the counselors would call sex addiction. We in the sexological world call it sexual compulsive behavior. In other words, I have sex drives I don't really understand, and they drive me to do a lot of things. But another was what he called catharsis, which was basically, there's some things I want to do, but I'm never going to get to do them in my marriage. Now, stay with me before you say, oh, yeah, well, he's talking about threesomes. And, no, just stay with me, stay with me. And rather than going out and having an affair, this is the second category, not the ones who are the compulsive people. I'm vicariously experiencing it by watching sexually explicit materials. And that is my valve, my safety valve, that keeps me from going out and doing the very same thing. And then the third category closely tied to that, which was I'm seeking this vicarious action because I'm afraid to reveal to my spouse what I want to do for fear that I'll be rejected, or I'll be seen as some kind of a pervert, or I'll be seen as not being godly. Remember, this was a group of ministers. And it was kind of interesting because one of the conclusions was, if these guys could have talked to their wives openly about this, then they probably wouldn't have looked at the porn, even if she didn't agree to do it.
Yeah, oh, of course.
But the fact that they could actually talk it out. Now, you say, then you're saying it's the wife's fault? No. That's not what I'm saying.
We're not casting blame here.
No, what I'm saying is, if you understand Jim's point, the wife in that situation could very well say porn is the problem. When porn, as you've been calling it, is the symptom, the problem is I can't be open and honest with you about what I'd like to do.
And it may be perception. Mm-hmm. I just think you're that way. I had a client not too long ago who said, I had these desires and my wife is very pious. That was his word. My wife is pious, and so to bring this up to her, I know I would be just rejected immediately. So he had a perception that she was, and we have no idea because he never did bring it up to her.
Therefore we don't know. But as you said, suppose that they had decided the way to reconcile that was to get rid of the internet. The problem, now that would help for a while.
Yeah.
But you don't have to just go to the internet at the home and et cetera, et cetera. The problem still would have been solved. And what you said a minute ago is 10 years later, you got the same problem because they're not looking at the issues. Now, if you're thinking, wait a minute, you're saying I've got to be a therapist? No, no. We are saying that if you begin to ask the question, if people don't leave what they have unless they believe what they're going to is better, what's going on here? Let's try to find that and quit fighting about the things that are the symptoms. Even though they're painful, they're bad, they hurt, and we don't blame you for being upset about them, but just going after that, it's not going to make things better and probably just make it worse.
You say guaranteed, but I'm telling you that, if I did 4 calls today, 3 of those were about symptoms. I'll do a 45-minute coaching session and, 37 of those are about the fight they just had over X, and they're still not addressing what the real issue is there.
Which is one of the major frustrations for people like us who are professionals in this business, because we spend so much time getting them on track.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Because what they're dealing with or what they're doing is just so off track. Mm-hmm. That's a major frustration we have. All right, so here's that point. Start finding the real problem rather than focusing on whatever is going on that you think is the problem. And the basic underlying, because I'm being a little repetitive here, people don't leave what they have unless they believe what they're going to do is better. So use that as your principle and ask, okay, what have I been doing that shows disrespect, dislike, or unlove? What about our relationship might do the same three things? Mm-hmm. And what is my husband or spouse who wants out of the marriage? What potentially might he or she be feeling about those things? And you still may need help. And, and we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes. As a matter of fact, you're going to need help. unless the marriage problem is relatively minor. I need to say that better. If it's big enough to start pulling you apart where one wants out, you need help.
Absolutely.
Okay, so what's our second thing to do?
That's good. The second thing I want to encourage you to do is to focus on you. Okay, take a look at you. Now, we talked a little bit ago about, talking about what the real problem is. This isn't in regards to being the problem. This is when difficulty comes or people are in trial and turmoil in their relationship, it is very common for them to feel out of control. Mm-hmm. And in feeling out of control, one of the natural tendencies for most people, not everybody, is to begin to try to get some control somewhere. Yeah. So we begin to control the other person. We begin to dictate what they do. We begin to focus on them and how they need to change. One of the most profound things that Shannon shared with me when we were separated, we were both Christians. At the time, I was not, and let me be clear, living any facade of a Christian life.
I haven't been there.
Yeah, I got a T-shirt. But Shannon was praying during that whole time. She said, God, change Jimmy. God, change Jimmy. God, change Jimmy. That was her prayer constantly being prayed. And she said she felt like one time, and she didn't claim to hear an audible voice, but in her heart, she felt like God told her, I'm not going to change Jimmy. You need to worry about you. Mm-hmm. Now, basically, that was after a secondary thing. She was saying, God, change Jimmy and make him love me. Mm-hmm. And she said, I felt like God told me, I don't make you love me. Why would I make Jimmy love you?
Wow.
And that it needs to be a choice, but that I want to work in you. And from that moment on, she had a focus change. Mm-hmm. It wasn't about me. We talk about focus illusion sometimes. Mm-hmm.
Why don't you explain quickly what that means?
Well, the simple version is that if I have that, it could be a person, could be the new house or the new car or whatever.
Winning the lottery, yeah.
Yeah, if I have that, I'm going to be happy. Everything's going to be okay. And we just know that's not true.
Yeah, it's actually research. And it started with lottery winners.
Oh,
and it's called a focus illusion. There's no one thing that's going to make you happy.
It's just not. Mm-hmm. So her thought and her process behind that was, if we realize that in her, it wasn't going to be me, it wasn't going to be this thing. She needed to look at her. And so one of the things that we learned from you, Shannon had already started doing before we came through the workshop. Shannon and I are graduates of the workshop, and it changed our life, was that Shannon worked on her pies. She was constantly she started looking at herself physically, intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. No,
which is what PIE stands for, guys. Just to make sure you understand: physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual.
And we have plenty of information on the website, podcasts, and things like that talking about PIE. So I won't go in depth if that's fine. But the point of that is, I can't control you. Mm-hmm. I can't control this circumstance. Mm-hmm. I can't control how you think. But what I can do is control me. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's a heck of a try.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be real.
It is.
And so, but I can control me. I can't control everything that I feel, but indirectly I can affect the way I feel by controlling how I think. Mm-hmm. So, you could create your own mad by dwelling on the issue, or you can reframe or redirect and train your mind not to focus on that, but to look at something else and not get as angry or as upset as it began. Right. And we're all guilty of that at different times. Sure. So what am I doing? I'm focusing on me. I'm going to work on me. Now, I'm not working on me on the behalf of my spouse. I'm working on me on behalf of what's best for me. Mm-hmm. Because remember, all relationships are connected. So there's pretty strong possibility that if I'm controlling in the life of my spouse, I'm probably controlling in the life of my kids or people who work with me and things like that. Now, maybe not definitely, but it's probably close. So if I begin to work on me, work on my pies, work on who I am, and take a look at me, then I actually begin to alter how I see life, how I do life, which will affect everything that's around me. And if the problem is connected with our relationship,
right,
it's not one-sided, how we interact. Think about this. If I interact better, what's better? If I interact in an area of love, of respect, of proving or showing in my actions that I believe those things, then is that going to have a positive or negative effect? It's going to be positive. And so I do that only by working on me as the human. What's the best I can be as Jim? What can I do with that? Now, I want to be clear about something, if I may, Joe. It's not about changing you. It's not about changing who you are in your core. It's about adapting. Okay? And so I want to be clear about something, because if I take a look at me and I'm working on the pies, sometimes what I'll do is I have to be willing to see myself as others see me. We talked about the blind side a while ago. And so in doing that, there may be needs that my spouse has that either I'm not aware of or I've rejected. And so I may need to alter that a little bit. And these are uncomfortable things to talk about.
Sure they are.
You know, because really, if I think about it, the way I dress isn't me. It's just how I dress. It might be an identification of my style or who I am, but it's not the core of who I am as a human being. So if my wife took a look at me one day and said, Jim, I'd love for you to get out of bustle shirts and sweatpants. Okay. And, you know, I have a home office now, so yes, it's a very sexy attire to see me in, I must confess. But if she looked at that and that's not attractive to her, then I have the ability to step out of that. I have the ability to say, you know what, she likes this, and I could do that for her. I'm not changing me. I'm not doing it to save my marriage. I'm doing it because I want to show respect. She cares for those kind of things. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so that can be a big deal. I'm looking at that, or perhaps there's a way that I do a certain thing. It's not me. It's a habit in which I've created in doing life,
right.
And it demonstrates something that's disrespectful. Well, I work with clients all the time who say, well, you know, I'm just not, they want me to do this or they want me to do that, and I'm just not going to change me. That's how I like life. And there's a difference between who you are in the core of a person and how you do life. Makes sense?
That can make all the sense in the world.
So I think that can be a deal. So if I'm focusing on me, I'm focusing on being the best person I could be at my stage and time in life. In addition to that, I'm looking at the possibility of, are there ways that I can better influence my spouse by showing them respect because I care about something that means something to them?
Right.
And we do that when we first start dating.
Oh, sure we did.
You know,
sure we did.
Well, not you and I, but you know, you and Alice and me and Shannon.
We just started dating recently. Jim and I don't date.
We don't.
Right. But to give an example, I think to make sure, let me make sure I hear what you're saying, because I think I do. And
good. I'd like to know if I know what I'm saying.
And my illustration will prove either I got it or I didn't. But you say sometimes people will reject, saying, I don't need to make a change, et cetera, because that's who I am. I remember a guy several years ago who was alienating his wife by his constant angry rages. And when I said to him, if you keep letting that happen, you just go into these explosive rages, at some point she's not going to be able to live with that anymore, and she's going to live you. And he said, well, that's just who I am. And it was like, no, who you are is a very hurt person that's inside there.
Yeah.
And we're not asking you to not be your authentic self.
No.
What we're doing is we're saying that some actions and behaviors are just going to continue to alienate the other person. And if you choose to continue those because, by golly, I have a right to do what I want to do, you do. You do have that right.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you also need to accept what consequence that will bring about.
And you probably won't like it.
Nope. No, you won't. And for those of you who are saying, well, wait a minute, whoa, back up. You're making it sound like everything is my fault in our marriage. That's not what we're saying at all. As a matter of fact, hear this. You really need to believe in you. Now, think about it this way. For example, if your spouse is having an affair, you're going to go through thoughts like, what's wrong with me? Am I not pretty enough? Am I not smart enough? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And what we're hoping you do is stop that kind of thought process.
Yeah.
Just don't let that happen. Because as you said, controlling our thoughts, as much as a human being can, controlling our thoughts affects everything else. And if you can believe in you, now that doesn't mean you're perfect, because we've not made anybody perfect yet. Okay? It doesn't mean you're perfect. But you've got to believe in you. I'm a decent person. I'm a good person. I've got a good heart. I can function in life. All those kinds of things. Because that gives you a different way of coming at this.
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're not talking about beating yourself up. As a matter of fact, we have an online course called Save My Marriage. And this course is for the spouse who wants to save the marriage when the other one doesn't. And therefore, it's an online course. It's 10 weeks long. It comes with videos. It comes with PDFs that they print out and things to do. And several times in the year, we'll do 10 weeks in a row of coaching calls where people can send in their questions and we give the coaching answers. And in one of those sessions, we tell people, here's a suggestion we suggest you do this week. It's actually week 4. Write a letter to your spouse where you say, these are the things I realize I didn't do right. And we tell them, do not go into all kinds of explanation and do not beat yourself up. Because if you do, it changes the way you see you. Mm-hmm. And the more you beat yourself up, it changes the way your spouse sees you.
Sure.
Or it actually may affirm the way the spouse sees you, which is not good. And so you acknowledge, you don't beat yourself up. You say you're sorry, but not over and over again. And why? Because it's like, I will acknowledge the things I have not done well, but I'm still a worthwhile and valuable human being.
Absolutely.
And never, ever lose sight of that. And so, Jen, talk a little bit more about authenticity. So how does that work with my emotions?
Well, I think that, I have a few clients that I'm working with right now, and they're strong personalities. They're strong people. They have a certain image in their life. Some of them have certain positions in front of people or things like that, and they have this never let them see you sweat type attitude, which is, it may be. I had an old mentor one time. It's funny how things have kind of changed a little bit, but I remember he told me once time I was about 23 years old.
So like a couple of years ago now.
Yeah, something like that, just before color television. And I remember him specifically telling me, he said, Jim, if they run you out of town, get in front and act like you're leading a parade, And I don't even know how to do that. I mean, he had tons of one-liners that he would give me like that. And, so what do you do with that? Well, I'm really not a proponent of fake it till you make it.
Me either.
It just doesn't overall pay off. Okay.
I agree.
And I'm not talking about, wearing your sleeve on your emotions on your sleeve, so to speak, all the time. But being authentic means I'm hurting right now. Mm-hmm. And showing that hurt in a healthy way mm-hmm. is healthy. Mm-hmm. Holding it in, at some point, the little term says, if you stow it, you will blow it eventually. Mm-hmm. You can only hold so much of that in.
Right.
You can only compress that until eventually you just can't take anymore. And when that happens, usually it's not something that's good. I've never heard of a good explosion. And so, it damages everything around it. And mm-hmm. and so being authentic sometimes means I'm taking a look at myself and I'm hurt, and I confess the fact that I'm hurt. It might give you enough time to step away from the situation to see it differently, or be able to come down from flooding or something like that. Being authentic also means sharing that hurt. It's not just being hurt and acknowledging the hurt, but it could be sharing it. When something is revealed that's tough, I mean, Shannon and I, believe it or not, still argue, and often, and she always wins. And no, we both win, because what happens in our discussions now and our arguments is that there is a habit that's been developed of communicating hurt without hurting.
There you go.
While we're communicating.
Okay, can you elaborate just a little on that? Because what I'm thinking is this. Okay, I've seen those people fake it. Like, mm-hmm. okay, to get my husband back, or my wife, whatever, I always pretend to be happy and smiling when he's around and my heart's breaking. Well, no, it's okay for you to let him know you're hurt. Now, whining, begging, pleading, that's not going to be good. Crying every time you see him, probably going to have a negative effect. But being real, being authentic. But in the process of being authentic, to finish that thought you were starting a minute ago,
Well, in the process of being authentic, I have to be able to communicate still so that that person can understand as well. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, there are times that I hurt Shannon that I didn't even know I hurt her. Mm-hmm. Now, some things are obvious. Me leaving her for another woman is a duh moment.
Yeah.
But when it comes to, there are things that I've used male humor, or I've joked, and I've done different things. And when I mean by male humor, I'm not talking about something dirty or things like that, but you know, sometimes as men, we've grown up in an environment where we kind of hang on each other, or the old term was diss on each other a little bit and joke a little bit.
Male humor is very sarcastic,
and that's not just, it's not good for Shannon.
Right.
You know, I have friends that I can do that with. You and I do that sometimes because we're close, and
even in front of people,
oftentimes in front of people, and but that doesn't work well with Shannon. Right. And I've done that a few times where it's hurt her. I can honestly say that the times that she has come to me, she's used a couple techniques that we've learned here at Marriage Helper, but she'll come to me and she'll say, hey, can I take a brick down for a minute? And basically those have been through the workshop or whatever. She's saying, I'm going to be vulnerable with you for a minute. And what that does is tell me Jimmy, you need to be safe. And you need to just listen for a minute. Listen really good. And when we talk about listening, listen to understand, don't listen to respond. This is a big deal for me. I mean, listening to understand is like, I'm a fixer kind of guy. I always want to fix things and make sure things are good. And when I'm listening with the mindset of fixing, a lot of times I miss that. I completely miss what needs to be happening. So when Shannon comes to me, she says, Jim, I want to take this brick down and I want to share something with you. You know, the other day when you said this or you did this, that hurt. I can't think of one time, Joe, that when she has shared it that way with me, when I've been like, oh, you're nuts or you're crazy, there's a sense of communication that I realize I've hurt her. Mm-hmm. Okay. Now, again, if you're in a very strained relationship, it may not turn out this way, but especially as you're turning towards each other and you're moving towards reconciliation or you're in reconciliation, this is a key communication factor of that hurt. Or watch, it doesn't always have to be that. It could be communicating the thing of, hey, I enjoyed that.
Yeah.
That was good. Thank you for doing that the other day.
Very good.
I think it's an important part. And we can neglect that. So, I again, you say, well, Jim, what do I do? We're separated right now. We don't talk that often, or when we talk, it's about business. Well, you're going to have to use some discernment there. Mm-hmm. And my encouragement, it's not faking it, but you know, you want to try to have about one or three rather four positive experiences to every one negative type experience. So, but be authentic. You have to be real.
Right. But I liked what you said, that you do it in a healthy way, which means being authentic is not, you crazy bitch, I hope you die.
Oh my God, no. I mean, I've heard it.
Yeah. And people feel that way. Mm-hmm. But what you're saying is in a healthy way where you can say, I just need to tell you that hurts.
Yeah. And it's the difference between a criticism and a complaint.
Yeah, all the difference in the world. It's not a character assassination. All right, so when you work on you, focus on me, it's not us saying, well, that's because it's all your fault. You screwed this up.
No way.
What we're saying is that's the only person you really do have any ability to control.
And you'll get the most, if you're going to use a word called success, or the most progress, positive progress by doing that.
Yep.
And if by some just terrible reason that your spouse decides to go on with life, listen carefully, you're still better.
Yes.
You're better because you have taken care of you and you are a healthy person. You know, we don't want anybody to get a divorce. We're here to help people save their marriages, but divorce does occur. And if you're in a certain time in your life, you're probably going to remarry at some point. Again, the point of that is you need to be a healthy person. A healthy person can help make a healthy relationship, and that's what this is doing, is making you healthy.
Well, I like what Shannon said about stopping asking God to make you love her, God to change you. A woman told me not long ago, I've given up on God. I don't believe in God anymore because I kept praying for God to change my husband and God didn't do it. To which I replied, you might have seen an answer to that prayer if you'd prayed for God to change you. And if you were willing to allow God to change you. Yeah. So it's to be the best you can be. And as Jim just said, We hope it saves your marriage, but if it doesn't, it's still the best thing for you. By the way, the pies that he mentioned, physical, intellectual, emotional, spiritual, I mentioned a couple of minutes ago, we have this program called Save My Marriage, that online video program. If you want to find out more about that, you can go to our website, Marriage Helper, that's marriagehelper.com, or call 615-472-1161 and say, I want to know about the Save My Marriage course. And in that, we will teach you about the pies and how the pies work, how to work on yourself physically, how to become better intellectually, emotionally, and by the way, why that one's so crucially important, and spiritually. A lot of other things in that 10 weeks as well, but I guess of all the things I have written over the years in books and articles and things like that, the one I hear back most from, other than my book I wrote on spiritual warfare 20-something years ago that still sells like crazy, it's ridiculous, is about pies. Oh,
I guarantee it. Joe, today I had 4 clients. This is a slow day for me, so to speak, because we're about to start.
Because we're doing recording.
We're doing recordings, and then the workshop starting this weekend. But 3 out of the 4 clients today, and none of them are in reconciliation. So out of all 4, all of them are in strained relationships right now. One has already been legally divorced, and every one of them, of those 3 of those people rather, said, "I'm telling you, I've been working on my pies. I'm better, and I'm stronger." Even the one that went through a divorce is saying, that's not what I want, but I haven't quit. I haven't given up. I'm healthy physically, intellectually, I'm healthy, emotionally, so important. I'm in a place where I'm being emotionally filled. Spiritually, I'm the best I can be. And it is definitely one of the most important things that can occur, which are the pies. And it doesn't change till you draw your last breath.
It's kind of interesting, I'll die someday, of course, and I'm going to be remembered. They'll put it on my tombstone, pies, and then they'll have a silhouette of me and go, they'll have misunderstand what pies means altogether when they see my silhouette. Like, this guy ate a lot of those pies.
Well, you got to have a little pie. It's not a problem, but it's a good thing.
All right, let's go to the third thing then. The first is?
Yeah, the first thing is you want to make sure you discover the right problem. Focus on what's important. Don't focus on the symptom. Right. That's really a distraction, and we'll just elongate it. The second one is that really look at you. And what we mean by that is be the best person you can be. Yep. In addition to what you can do to be a part of the solution, not just a part of the problem.
And one last thing about that. In relationships, when one person changes, the relationship changes.
Oh, yeah. The whole dynamic changes.
So it's crucially important. And number 3?
Yeah. And then number 3 is we don't have to take a lot of time on it. You would think that it would be the most obvious for people. But the third one we talk about is get some help.
Get the right help.
The right help. What's kind of crazy about that whole thing, or the whole situation when it comes to help, is that if we're not careful, we get help. It's just not the right kind. Every time I choose to lose weight, and the reason I say every time is it's more than once. But every time that I choose to lose weight, it's amazing the people that come out of the woodwork to give me that kind of information. You got to do this. I've heard you got to do low carb, all fruit, no fruit, and I have a friend of mine, Joe, he's from Texas. And I remember he would go and try a different diet every couple months, and, he could lose weight he was this brainiac engineer guy. I mean, super smart. And he could find a diet that could cause him to lose weight. I mean, he could lose weight eating Lay's potato chips somehow, And so if you went by that, you really could find, I'm going to eat Lay's potato chips. And there's a tremendous amount of information out there. We live in a time where it is both beneficial and kind of detrimental to who we are as humans, and that's the internet age. You don't have to be qualified. You don't have to be certified. All you have to do is have a connection, and you can post anything you want and call yourself an expert at it. Now, calling yourself an expert doesn't make you the expert. It's when other people call you an expert, you may want to think about it. And that comes from time, tested, proven results. That's what it comes from. And so what's really, I think, powerful is that what we offer with Marriage Helper through your research and the research of others who've contributed to it is a proven way, as it were, a path in order for us to follow and have the best relationships possible. Some of it's step by step, and some of it is kind of a work in progress as you go through it. But nevertheless, if you go on the internet and you're going to read, if you find 5 sites, there'll be 7 different opinions. I mean, sometimes on the same website, you'll find they contradict themselves one after another. You know what I mean? So I often tell clients, stop researching.
Yeah.
Just stop. Okay? Stop. Well, I need help. Yeah, you need the right help, though. You need to talk to the right people. You need to get the right information. And I think that's very important.
As an illustration of that, just before we started this recording, I was showing Jim some websites that were getting research, quote unquote, about pornography. And I was pointing out to Jim, okay, let me show you what's wrong with this research. In other words, how this cannot be valid. And then let me show you, because that's one thing you have to learn how to do if you're going to earn a PhD, is that you have to learn how to sift through and know what is valid research, what is invalid research, and even invalid research to find the flaws.
Yeah.
That's the value of what's called a peer-reviewed journal, like the Journal of Sexual Health, for example, or whatever, is that other people in the same profession who've been trained very well can find the flaws in your research.
Yeah.
And that's what we want in academia.
Well, we grow.
In academia, it's like, okay, thank you for pointing that out. You're right, I was wrong. Or, no, I think you missed it. Let me give my, et cetera. But we were looking at this research about pornography, and I'd showed Jim 3 or 4 sites in a row, click, 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 that were claiming research. and there was nothing scientific or valid about the research. Then you go a step beyond that, and when it comes to relationships, love, marriage, those kinds of things, Jim's right. People will write. We sometimes talk about a thing called limerence. I have looked at several websites about limerence that's popped up. One is by a teenage girl.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. Now, I'm not saying she's not a very bright teenage girl.
No.
Based on her writing skill, she's a pretty smart girl. Mm-hmm. But she doesn't have any research or experience with limerence. Mm-hmm. So she read a book. Mm-hmm. Now, from that book, she has been able to write some eloquent sentences on her website that you go, whoa, because she's just a beautiful writer. And my guess is this girl's going to be something someday.
Right.
Okay. Not that she's not something now, but I'm talking about when she gets further education, gets out of high school. Mm-hmm. All right. But that's my point. You said, and you're right, anybody can write those things, and they can claim all kinds of authority, like, well, my wife and I went to XYZ school or university. I saw that on the guys the other day, and so I looked up the university. It's actually listed by the U.S. government as a diploma mill. But most people won't look that up.
Of course not. But could I get that? Do you think I could get the web address for that? Get a couple more letters behind my name. It'd be very helpful.
I totally offended a guy once whose, quote, PhD, end quote, was from a diploma mill, and I just called him on it in front of some people. I was younger, much younger. Wouldn't do it the same way today, but it was like, oh, give me a break. Now, if that sounds like we're putting everybody else down and saying we're the only experts, no, do not hear that. There's some awesome work out there, tremendous work by people who study diligently. There's also a lot of idiots.
Well, it's tough. You know, I mean, I read a book on childbirth the other day. I do not think I'm a childbirth expert. I mean, you go a lot of places with that, but it's true. I may know about it, but it doesn't make me an expert at it. I may have witnessed or seen people go through it, but that doesn't make me an expert. I may be a teacher that teaches on some subjects of it. That doesn't make me an expert. The point about it, and I'm not touting myself as an expert, what I am saying is that there's so much information out there that help is readily available, but it's not necessarily the right help, and you want to be really careful. And we're not the only ones out there. Mm-mm. I do, from experience, believe that we are the best marriage resource out here. I really do believe that. I can say it. It's not my company. But that's not arrogance. That's just a complete faith and confidence in what we have and the product we have. We've had, a couple 100,000 go through a variation of what we teach and what we do with great success, as marriage fulfillment and things like that. Wow. Why would I not believe in it? But there's some great folks out there that do some really, really good work. Yeah. Again, there are plenty of people out there who have great intentions, but they just do not have the ability or the credibility to do it.
So use some good common sense. Like one lady told me, Well, I'm seeing a counselor, and she's telling me what to do about my marriage. And then later in the conversation, I find out that her counselor is her mother's best friend. Mm. You understand that you're not going to get unprejudiced, unbiased advice from your mom's best friend, or at least it's not likely that you will.
Right.
So use good sense. And if you would like to see what we do, you can go to our website, marriagehelper.com, or call us at 615-472-1161. And here's what you need to understand about that. We have courses for online, like I mentioned earlier, Save My Marriage, if your spouse doesn't want to work on it. We also have coaching with people like Jim, and surely as you have listened to Jim here, you understand that this guy's really good. He understands, and if he were coaching you, he'd be asking questions, listening, really grasping your problem, and then not telling you what to do, but helping you figure out what to do. And he can coach either one spouse or both spouses. You might immediately be saying, I'm going to go phone and sign up a thing with Jim right now. And I hope you do if he's available. Jim books up. He books up really intensely. But Jim also teaches other coaches that work with us. Understand this. We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We don't have to make a profit. We do have to make enough money to continue to exist, but not anything beyond that. And we genuinely, honestly care about people. And so it's point number one was?
Well, point number one is make sure you're working on the right problem, or you're addressing the real issue there and not focusing on symptoms.
And number two?
Number two is take a look at you. Make sure that that you're taking care of yourself. You're working on your pies. And the second aspect is, how can you be a part of the solution to perhaps what that original problem was?
Excellent. And number three, get the right help. If it's not us, just make sure it's good help.
Yeah, I think that's key. And I just want to encourage folks, I haven't been in your exact situation, but I know Joe and Alice have been through their issues, that's for sure. Shannon and I have been through literal hell, mostly from my doing, not from hers. One of the things that I just have to leave you with today, and that's this. No matter what it looks like right now, it is no indicator of what your future is. And let me be clear. You get to create what that is. There's no destiny involved here. There's no fate that's involved here. What's involved is your vision. What's the vision you have for you? What's the vision you have for your relationship? What's the vision you have for your family? And how will you intentionally do the right things to move yourself in the direction, in the long game, in the marathon of what this is, to come up with the relationship that you really want? Not a fixing or repairing of your marriage, but a creating a relationship like you've never experienced.
That's great.
It's powerful and it is possible. You need to believe and put kind of some action to that faith.
Well, I know for Alice and me, the relationship we had when we put ours back together, and Alice and I actually were divorced for 3 years before we put ours back together, after I left her for another woman. The relationship we had after we made the relationship right, this marriage is no comparison to the one before. I wouldn't go back to that one, but I'm loving this one.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Joe.
Okay. Thank you, Jim, for being with us.
Hey, man, it was a real pleasure. I just want to say thank you for all the hard work you have done, plus also the mentoring and investment you've put into my life. You've made a huge difference. You and Alice are I feel like my last name is Beam. Which is funny because my first name's Jim. And side note in that, Joe, you don't know how many people quote you or me and say, "Yeah, I was talking to Jim," or they call me Joe, and I just let them go on because it's the only way I'll have a doctorate in my repertoire, because I'm not going back to school.
And it takes a lot of work. Thank you guys for listening. I hope you tune into more of our podcasts. Thank you kindly.